back again to talk about motion in art. We were looking at time, temporal works, works that unfold over time, using some of those vocabulary terms like duration to talk about how long an artwork lasts or seems to last. Tempo, the pace at which or speed at which a work seems to take place or does take place. And we also looked at how editing in film and video can affect the sense of tempo, or can condense a lot of information into a little amount of time. We also looked at implied time and how you can give us the sense that time has passed in a work of art, as we can see in like comic books or graphic novels and that sort of thing. So now we're going to take a look at motion, which you'll see there's a lot of overlap because there's actual motion and then there's implied motion. On the right, we're looking at a sculpture, which is actually a mobile by Alexander Calder. Artworks that are actually moving, we call those kinetic art, artifacts that are designed to move. He made these mobiles as well as pieces that would go onto the wall and have moving parts. So this tower with a pinwheel, for example. I think I have a video here of Calder at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. So you can see one of his pieces in movement.
We tend to think of sculpture as a very static art form, something that sits on a pedestal and we move around it. But Calder injected motion into art in a way that no one else ever had. The mobiles are suspended works of art. They are moved simply by a gentle touch of the hand or by air currents. They come alive to evoke our experience of nature, like petals of a flower or a leaf fluttering in the wind. These constellations of forms are so ingeniously balanced. They take on different forms as the object moves through space. And so the object is really never the same. We can stand in one place and it moves for us. There is something about Calder that sends us back to childhood, sends us back to the sort of wonders of discovery. They are so delicately constructed that your very presence actually impacts the work of art. This wonderful grace in these slow-moving objects has so much to do with his interest in dance, in performance. It is a kind of choreography of movement. There's big movement as the entire object spins, but then there are subsidiary movements within the object designed very carefully so that the elements do not touch one another. And the shadows become sort of secondary work of art. Calder developed the mobile at a time when artists were interested in communicating the fast pace of modern life. I think the mobiles help to slow us down. We understand that they're turning, they're behaving, they're reacting. There is no way to fully experience a mobile without spending time with it. Calder's works hold our attention, and anytime you can step out of time with a great work of art is a gift from that artist.
Here are several mobiles by Calder that were in the Museum of Contemporary Art in Chicago. So in this case, even though the parts aren't actually moving, they move our eye around the artwork using those points and lines. So you're going from one part of the sculpture to another, following those thin pieces of, I think that is wire in this case. So your eye is moving even though the work itself is not moving. Of course, we can see that in the same way with motion-based works, such as this piece by Ken Rinaldo.
Autopoiesis is an artificial life robotic sculpture series commissioned by the Kiasma Museum in Helsinki, Finland. It consists of 15 musical and robotic sculptures that interact with the public and modify their behaviors based on both the presence of the participants in the exhibition and the communication between each separate sculpture. This series of robotic sculptures talk with each other through a hardwired network and audible telephone tones, which are a musical language for the group. The interactivity engages the viewer participant, who in turn affects the system's evolution and emergence. This creates a system evolution as well as an overall group sculptural aesthetic. Autopoiesis utilizes a number of unique approaches to create this complex and evolving environment. It uses smart sensor organization that senses the presence of the viewer participant and allows the robotic sculpture to respond intelligently.
So I thought that was pretty cool. It's a work that is motion-based, actual motion, and it's also a kind of collaborative and participatory work because it depends on the person moving through the space in terms of how it will move the actual artwork. There's other artworks like this piece by Bridget Riley that gives you the impression of motion, in other words, implied motion. Bridget Riley was one of a number of what are called op artists. Here, I'll bring my image back, there we go. Op artists worked with optical illusion. So trying to give your eye the sense that something is moving, kind of play a trick on your eye a little bit. It's a little trippy. And that's kind of what we have going on here in this piece by Louise Bourgeois, called The Arch of Hysteria from 1993. It's made out of bronze and it hangs from the ceiling. And so in this case, it's not really moving per se. I mean, it's hanging from the ceiling, so you might see it kind of sway a little bit back and forth. But besides that, it's not moving, but it has this implication or impression of movement through the pose of the body. So again, we have implied time, we have implied movement or motion, or with Bernini's sculpture of David, the story of David conquering Goliath. So we're at the height of that dramatic moment. And Bernini, the artist, gives us this sense of, or illusion of movement by torquing the body in this kind of twisted position and showing his muscles all tensed up. And he's in this kind of pose where we get the sense that he's about to release that stone and send that stone flying towards Goliath. So it's a moment filled with this illusion. It's a moment that captures that illusion of movement. Another artist who does that is Kehinde Wiley, an artist who takes African-American subjects, usually people who are just totally anonymous, everyday people, and elevates them and puts them into these kind of heroic poses, like this equestrian portrait of quote-unquote Count Duke of Olivares. So he's taking some of the traditional models of painting of depicting people in positions of power, like rulers or leaders, and inserting people who are otherwise not known. So people who are friends of his or people who he meets, and putting them in these kind of very dramatic poses that have the implication or illusion of movement. Here are a couple other examples by Kehinde Wiley, who has been a very popular artist in recent years and landed him on the cover of Art in America, which is a really famous art magazine. And it also landed him the commission to paint Barack Obama's portrait in 2018, which became very famous. It is now in the National Portrait Gallery. That sense of implied movement or implied motion. Here's another example. with the illusion of movement in this painting by Marcel Duchamp. It's well known because it was so shocking at the time and seen as a real affront to all the traditional methods and modes of painting that came before. This is from 1912. So try to like put yourself back in that time period, 1912, nothing like this had really been seen before. There was a lot of modern art coming out around this time that was very jarring because nobody had ever dared to paint like this before. But Duchamp, you can see, is showing us a figure in motion, descending, going down a staircase. How do you imply movement when something is unmoving? So it's just painting on a flat surface. How do you give the impression of movement? So he's partially emulating what had been done already in photography by a figure known as Edward Muybridge. So this is Edward Muybridge's Woman Walking Down the Stairs from 1872. So this is like several decades earlier. And Muybridge was taking a photo of a woman as she walked downstairs to understand how the body moves. And it also gives us an idea of what a sequence might be, the order of a series of events or images. So it's a sequence of a woman walking down the stairs. And it shows the way that movement and time unfold. Ai Weiwei is a contemporary Chinese artist who is very well known for being kind of like a political figure. He's been jailed in China for his art. This is one example of a piece he did in 1995. It's actually a documentation of a performance piece in which he took a very old urn from the Han Dynasty. So it's an ancient Chinese urn, and he dropped it onto the ground to basically break it into many small pieces, because he knew that by doing so, he would give the piece more value. Believe it or not. So this contemporary artist, his work sells for more than this ancient Chinese urn would. So he actually made it more valuable by breaking it. But it's also a way of like saying, hey, F you to the traditional art establishment. And this is a piece, another photograph by, in this case, Robert Capa, who's capturing motion through this very like blurred kind of photograph. So it gives you this impression that you're looking at something that is very fast moving, because you can see that it's just like a streak of a blurred image. We don't really see anything too crisply, and that gives us the impression that something was moving very fast. So again, implied movement captured in a photograph in this case. So thanks for taking a look at some examples of motion in art with me. Until next time.